Hello, it's David Kavanaugh back again, finally, after quite an absence. I have some prep to do on this bike, a 81 Yamaha XJ550 Seika. I'm planning on riding the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride May 18th in Rochester, New York. And I have a little bit of stuff to do on this. Last time I rode it, it was a little rough. I think from keeping some gas in the float bowls. The emulsion tube that runs down to the bottom of the float bowl is probably getting gummed up. So I'll have to take the carbs off and clean those out, throw them in the ultrasonic cleaner. This gas tank, you might see another gas tank over there. That was an excellent eBay find. I'm going to swap out the tank. I need to do some prep on the other tank first before I can do that. And I also need to take care of some rust. I rebuilt, like I painted the swing arm, but when I stripped these down, I failed to protect them properly. So I have a kit from Caswell that I'll use to plate those in zinc. And the kit is called Copy CAD. It's supposed to be a replacement for a cadmium coating, so it's got that gold look. So what you do is you have a zinc coating, and then you put on this passivate, a yellow passivate to give it a yellow color. But there's different colored passavates. So the blue one gives you like a silver result, and I think that hardware down there would look great just in plain silver. So that's what I'm planning on doing. I guess back to this tank. Look at this thing. This was, I believe it was new old stock, and the only flaws I can find is that there's some cracks in the decals. I can feel the edge of the decal, so I'm thinking, geez, I could almost take those off and put brand new decals, but I'm not sure I'm going to bother at this point. Another issue is there's a little surface rust in there. Let me see if we can see that on camera. Yeah, there you go. So I have some rust dissolver here. I've used Metal Rescue or Evaporust in the past, and they've worked quite well. So in this case, I'm going to have to plug the holes. I had made these plugs before to cover up the openings in the bottom of the tank. You can see that there's a fitting there, or an opening for the fuel level sensor, and then the other one is for the petcock. So these covers can bolt right on there, and then I have a stopper that fits in here very nicely. So this will not fill up the tank. So what I end up doing was I'll just set a towel here or on the floor, and I'll roll the tank on various sides and let it sit for several hours or however long it takes. I'll flip it around, and I'll have it sit on all different sides. Now I did this with the tank on my F-Zero 1000, and it turned out great. So I'll do that process on here, get all the rust out. I'll hit it. Usually what I do after that is to dry it out. I try to flush all the water out that I can by other means, but then I usually end up chasing it with some acetone, because that'll absorb water. And then I flush the acetone out, and then what's left dries very easily. In fact, before it flash rusts, at that point I'll have to hit it with some fogging oil, which I have over there on the shelf. So that'll be what I do with the tank, just leave it natural. My old tank, the tank that came on the bike, will be up for sale at that point. I'll strip off things like I put new seals on the tank cap. These emblems aren't anything to write home about, but they're somewhat intact, even if they're a little cracked. Those are going to go in the new tank. You cannot find those emblems anymore, not unless you're incredibly lucky. But yeah, nobody has new ones. So yeah, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, if you haven't seen it before, these are some pins I got from when I ran it one other time. I'll post a link up on the top here, and hopefully I'll get this video out and the bike done before then. So I have to get the old tank taken off the bike now. Once I get everything disconnected below, then I can take the tank off and move it over to the bench. So now I need to strip down the old tank, take off the emblems, and then I'll get the cap taken off, and then the fuel level sender and the petcock. And here I'm showing off the tank. As I mentioned, it's going to be for sale after this. So now I'm installing the covers over the openings in the tank. I'll pour some rust remover into the tank, make sure it's not leaking, and then pour in the rest. And I'm just going to find something to prop it up with so that I can start derusting the front end of the tank. And then more on the front, more on the back end. And while that's happening, I'll switch over to the bike again, move the side panel. I'd replace the grommets that hold that on because the old grommets can get kind of stiff and make it more likely to crack the side panel when you're taking it off. So anyway, my side panels are still uncracked, thank goodness. Taking out the air filter, and then I have to loosen up all of the clamps that hold the rubber boots onto the carburetors. Here's a little peek inside the tank. Looks pretty good, but I've got this borescope I'm going to use to take a look inside and check the other recesses of the tank and see how I'm doing. From what I recall, it was pretty good, except that that area that was in the center of the tank, that hump in the middle that goes over the frame, that was pretty hard to reach, and so I'm going to end up having to agitate the tank and clean that area off. Yeah, so that did the trick and it cleaned off that hump in the middle of the tank just fine. So everything's looking great, and I have to empty out the rust remover. So I had removed that petcock opening plate and drain that into a bucket. And once that takes a little while to kind of slosh it around properly and get it all out, but I get most of it out. So after I've gotten rid of the rust remover, put it back in the container, I have to rinse the tank. So I had the hose ready to go. So I start spraying in there, and then I realize, well, actually no, I think what I want to do is I want to plug the tank, and I want to be able to slosh it all around so I can rinse it out really well. So I take a break from that and install the plugs again. So you can tell my masterful production skills here, where I forgot to rename the camera. What I'm using is the heat gun to blow some hot air into the tank and try to get things dried out. I think at this point it's still water, and I use some paper towel to try down in the tank to try to mop up any leftover water, and then I use the heat gun to finish it off. And when I was done with that, I put some acetone in the tank and sloshed that around, and then flushed it out, and let it drain out, and then I used paper towels to try to get most of it out. And then the heat gun makes quick work. It causes the acetone to flash off, so that leaves the tank really dry. And you can see that I have the fogging oil sitting there. That's because I sprayed some of that inside the tank to try to protect the surface from flash rusting. And so I'm screwing on the old emblems. I managed to find some emblems in Australia that are flat, and they won't match the curvature of the tank, but they're the right size. So I plan to try to heat form those against the tank when those arrive, probably next month actually. So yeah, back to the carburetors, which I was able to get removed earlier. I taking off the float bowls because I'm expecting that I've got some crud in there from having fuel over the winter. Now I always use stable, so the fuel shouldn't be too varnished in there over the winter. Um, in fact, it ends up when I look in there, there's very little residue in the float bowls, and you can kind of tell from here. They look quite nice. Um, and I think I'm pointing out there's a little passageway in there that is the thing that gets plugged, and that's what I'm going to be spraying out with some um, brake cleaner, and to make sure that's clear in each of the float bowls. So what I'm going to show here is that the fuel pipes I had used turned really hard where they were in contact with the fuel. And they looked like that clear tube when I installed it. And it was supposed to be fuel safe, but I ended up having to buy some actual black rubber fuel line to replace it with. So here I'm cutting that and getting that all sized and installed. So now I'm able to get the carburetors reinstalled. So I kind of wrestle them back into position. Eventually they're in the right place and all lined up with the intake boots. Yeah, once I finish dealing with the throttle cable, I had to get that hooked up, and then I could line up the carburetors on one side and then the other, and then it turns out I can just start working them in, and then once they pop in, we're good to go. And I was able to get the clamps tightened up. And now I got the heat gun out again because I need to soften up the boots that connect the carburetors to the airbox. And this is the real struggle bus here. My gosh. Because these things have to push through. There's like two shoulders on there that, like two ridges, I guess, that hold the boots up into the opening of the airbox. And I've got to push one of those ridges through the airbox and leave the other one inside. And at that point, I've also got to manage to get the boot onto the carburetor opening at the same time. So it's a real struggle, and spaces are tight, especially on the opposite side of the bike. And there's hardly any room to get your hand into the airbox to help from the inside. Anyway, I eventually managed to get it, and tightening up the clamps on there now. Getting the airbox put back together. Now here's where we make sure things are working, and I throw a little bit of fuel into my test fuel tank, and I get that hung up, and we'll see if it starts. All right, let's give it some choke. Let's go. Yeah, so that worked out. So far, so good. Just gonna get some fuel into the actual fuel tank now. and then I'll get the tank installed on the bike. Got the vacuum line hooked up. I get the fuel line hooked up, and I believe there's one more connector for the fuel sending unit. Alright, so I gotta get the side panel back on. I'll say that I did not have time to derust and zinc coat the hardware at the rear of the bike, and I didn't go on the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride because it was raining. At least for me it was that day, so I stayed home. But next video, I will take care of the zinc plating. See ya. Thanks.